today's episode of World War II, April 8th, a British destroyer almost takes out a German heavy cruiser. A Polish submarine is not asleep at the watch and takes out a German troop ship heading towards Norway. The combined force of British, French, and Indian forces take a key objective in Italian East Africa. Roosevelt decides to freeze wages and prices uh, during the war. Socialism! And troops of the Patton's Third Army discover a magical treasure trove in a deep salt mine. Let's get started. All right, so on April 8th, 1940, as I mentioned in yesterday's video, the Germans launched their seaborne invasion of Norway. The actual date was to be on April 9th, but of course, for them to land on April 9th, they got to leave on April 8th, which is what happened here. I told you about the fact that the British did not react well. The Royal Navy did not react well at all. They misinterpreted this. They thought it was going to be a breakout into the Atlantic instead of, what it was, an invasion of Norway. So their ships were out of position. But there was one ship that was not out of position. It was called the HMS Glowworm. It was a destroyer. It discovered the of ships that was heading. Turns out they were heading towards, I believe it was Bergen. And the glowworm obviously could not stand up against a heavy cruiser. So the captain, bless his heart, he decided to ram the Hipper, the German heavy cruiser Hipper. So that's an interesting choice. Probably not going to sink it, but can definitely put it out of action for a while. And of course, logically speaking, he knew it was going to happen to his destroyer if he did that. Well, he rammed it, and it did cause heavy damage to the Hipper. It did put it out of action for a while, but the glowworm was sunk, and 118 sailors went down with it, including the captain. It was Gerard Broadmead Roop, and logically and deservedly so, he received the Victoria Cross for his bravery. Unfortunately, it was posthumous because he was one of the 118 sailors of the crew who were killed in the attack. But just a wonderfully brave attack. On April 8th, 1940, same day, the Germans had pressed a captured passenger slash cargo ship called the Rio de Janeiro, and it was in the main group of, the main flotilla that was heading towards Norway, as I said, towards Bergen. Well, the British submarines in general pooped the bed on this occasion, just like the main body of the Royal Navy. But this Polish submarine did not. It was a Polish submarine Orzel. Now, listen, it was under British command, but it was crewed by Poles, and it did see this group going there and penetrated the escort shield and shot a salvo of torpedoes into the convoy. It hit the Rio de Janeiro, hit it with a couple torpedoes, broke its back, and it sank. What's interesting is that not only did it take out, I don't know, about 150 men, including there was a brigade or a detachment of Luftwaffe flak troops. Uh, Also, about 80 horses were drowned as well. I think about 183 survivors were picked up. The survivors did admit that they were on their way to Bergen. And I just like to say that, because I'm a child of the 1970s, and I remember back then I don't remember if it was a book or if it was a movie, but the title was "They Shoot Horses, Don't They?" And so my question here, was this an appropriate question? They drown horses, don't they? On April 8th, 1941, British, Indian, and Free French forces attacked all of the hill forts that were defending the Italian East Africa colony city of Massawa in Eritrea. And once they did that, the Italian commander pretty much knew the jig was up. In addition, the RAF had just sunk an Italian mine layer, excuse me, in the port. And seeing that there was no defending the city anymore, the Italian commanding general decided, I think his name was Bonetti. I just love to say Italian names. Bonetti. Anyway, he reached out to the commanding British general and said that, yes, we want to surrender. And he and 10,000 of his compatriots went into the bag, as they say, and would end up most likely in Canada, helping to harvest agriculture and whatever else they put them to good use for, away from the war. So actually, it was probably a big, good deal for the Italians. They're going to survive the war because unlike the Germans and especially the Soviets, your survival rate was almost 100% if you were a POW of the Western Allies. On April 8th, 1943, U.S. President Roosevelt froze wages and prices of utilities in order to prevent inflation. And this is interesting, he also banned workers from changing jobs unless the switch would further the war effort. Kind of curious about what mechanism was put in place to determine whether a job switch would further the war effort or not. It sounds to me like you're basically screwed. You were stuck in a job until the war was over. This was 43, so you got 2.5 years, well, about a year and a half left, I suppose, until the war was over. So, interesting. I'm sure a lot of my right-wing fellow citizens might be saying socialism, but it was FDR, right? So it was expected. Oh, it was a simpler time back then, simpler time. And then finally, on April 8th, 1945, Patton's troops of the Third Army, they came upon a treasure trove, and I mean literal treasure trove of goodies in a salt mine in Mühlhausen, Germany. They found gold, they found art, and they found other treasures in the Merker salt mine. And I have a suspicion, I have no proof, could be fake news, could just be one man's opinion, but I suspect the lion's share of that was belonged to Hermann Goering, because Goering was the king of the looters when it came to the Nazis. I mean, this guy looted everything. In fact, if there was a looting hall of fame, I suspect Goering would have the corner office there. Um, I like the idea of a looting hall of fame. It makes me think that how these small towns in the U.S. They'll be famous for one thing, like some town in I think in Nevada has the world's biggest, the tallest thermometer. I've heard about the biggest ball of twine somewhere, biggest steam engine or whatever I can imagine. And I don't know, let's say in the far corner of Kansas somewhere, there's a Looters Hall of Fame. I could just see that with a wax portrait of Goering made out of butter. That would be appropriate, I think. Well, anyway, that's enough for today. That's my video for April 8th. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you tomorrow.